Welcome to Red River Podcast. Back in the quarantine, we're still isolating, doing nothing. Today, I get to talk to an author, someone who actually writes, a music journalist, someone who wrote a book, which isn't something we get to do very often. So today, what's up, Mike Henneberger?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
How did you come across us? I know that we have a mutual friend in Dana, does big picture media, and you told me about your book. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so I think I found you because when I first reached out to you, it was about your past podcasts. And I think I was just searching for, music podcasts or pop culture podcasts or kind of anything that my book might fit into, just kind of working on promoting it and getting it out there. I come from a DIY punk background, so
Hell yeah.
even though hired one of the best PR companies in music right now, I still can't help myself. I'm still gonna network and meet people and talk to people about what's going on. And so yeah, I think that's just how it happened. I came across your podcast and I'm a huge pop culture nerd, so I've been listening and man, so I reached out.
All right, cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I don't like to wait for things. Even if someone's helping, I just, if there's an avenue I can get to, I'm going to use it. So yeah, I mean, the name of the book that we were talking about is Rock Bottom at the Renaissance, an emo kid's journey through falling in and out of love in and with New York City. And the cover here, you have the headphones, you have some pills, some booze, and a typewriter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really want to talk about this book because a lot of times I've heard you mention on your own podcast and other people's podcasts that everything is a soundtrack. And I find that really relatable because my day, I'm always thinking of a song in my head to go with whatever scenario. So I believe you said the same thing, and that's super relatable to me.
That's great because I meet people who don't get that, and it's so weird to me because I feel like we all grow up with music, more than anything else. The foundations of pop culture are TV, movies, and music. And I think more than TV and movies, everybody is exposed to music more than those other things. So but I guess you have to be a big nerd about it and really dive into it to kind of have that mindset where you just associate songs with whatever's going on. So if there's, anything that you come across in your day makes you think of a song, and that's just how my brain works. And so in this book, every chapter of the book is named after a song. And that song kind of plays the role of a soundtrack in the book where if you're reading the book, the lyrics pop up throughout, mixed in between paragraphs and stuff. Like if it was the soundtrack of a movie and the song would swell up, that's where the lyrics pop up in the book. And that's just because that's the way that I think. I didn't set out to write this book in that format, but when you read the book, the first chapter, I'm listening to Jimmy Eat World's 23, and that's just how that song made its way into that chapter. And then there's another chapter about Two Door Cinema Club, and it starts at a Two Door Cinema Club concert. So it's just associate music with everything, and then I associate everything with music. So it's if I'm telling a story about something that happened at a Two Door Cinema Club concert, I'm not going to leave the music out of it, I can't just tell the story without the music.
And I know you're a married guy, and I have a girlfriend as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes for me, my girlfriend definitely, she's a big music fan too, but sometimes, she definitely is man, you're such a geek about certain things. Is she the same as you, or does she look at you as kind of funny because of how much you relate to music, to everything?
Oh man, no, I definitely get my balls busted about how sentimental I am. this is weird because I'm in my home office and my wife is in the living room on the other side of the door.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know how much she can hear me, but
She heard it all. Come on.
yeah, no, it's just true. No, she loves all the same kind of music that I do, which is awesome, and one of the things that kind of drew us together in the first place. But yeah, so she likes some of that, but it's definitely, there's definitely a different like way that I look at it. And I think part of it is that like she's from Long Island, so she like grew up like going to Taking Back Sunday and Brand New shows at like VFWs and like churches and stuff like church basements or whatever. So she grew up having that, you know, and I grew up in South Texas where I didn't have a scene. I had to drive 4 hours for shows.
Holy shit. How did so?
Yeah,
I'm just out of curiosity because I love the fact that you came from a small town in Texas, and now you live like all the way in New York. But like just to further getting into whatever you were about to bring up, like what was it like to grow up in such a small town where you said you had to drive 4 hours just for music?
Yeah, man. I grew up in a population 25,000, which is like tiny, but it's like 25,000 with a naval base and a college. So like a good chunk of the town isn't people from that town, you know? They're just passing through for the Navy or for college. There was Corpus Christi, Texas, which is like 45 minutes away. And there was a like decent punk scene there, but the touring bands didn't go there. Touring bands went to San Antonio, which was 2 hours away sometimes, but mostly they'd go to Austin, which was 4 hours away, or Dallas. But even back then, like, I mean, I'm 30, I'll be 38 in a couple months. So we're talking about late 90s, early 2000s. Late 90s was like pre-internet, really, for me.
Did you get to watch At the Drive-In at their height?
No, man, I didn't see At the Drive-In until they reunited at Coachella in 2012, and I went specifically for that.
Wow.
So yeah, but here's the thing: is At the Drive-In, they're from El Paso, and El Paso is 12 hours away from my hometown.
Jesus, that explains.
Yeah.
It. Okay.
Yeah. So that's like when you're talking New York City, like what's 12 hours away? Georgia?
Yeah, like California, basically.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Like when I moved to LA in my 20s, El Paso, Texas was the halfway point to Los Angeles from my hometown.
Yeah.
Like you're still in Texas. So like I didn't like At the Drive-In wasn't like a local band for me.
No, but, yeah, great point. Great point to me. Like, you know,
yeah,
you say Texas, and to me, I'm like, oh, it's about 12 miles, probably, you know.
Yeah, I know, man, it's crazy. But and we used to drive to Dallas like 8 hours away because I mean back then, man, in the late 90s, you know, things weren't as connected as they are now. So I think it must have been harder for bands to like route tours too.
What were some of the bands that you were keeping up with in that area that would go through or that you would drive? You know, like what were some of the memorable shows at that time?
Well, I'll never forget, and I'm coming up on the anniversary, like August 16th, my first concert ever that I went to when I was 13 years old. All my skater friends were going to this show in Corpus Christi, like 45 minutes away, and it was Blink-182.
Okay.
In 1996, Cheshire Cat was out. They weren't on the radio yet. It was a $5 show at a 200 cap all ages venue. And that was the first concert I ever went to by choice because we had a little skater and rollerblader community in my hometown, which is like a thing that'll only happen in like a small town because skaters and rollerbladers are supposed to want to kill each other. But yeah, I mean, we all would like skate every like Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday nights. We would bring out all our rails and ramps in this big parking lot and skate. And people would pass around mixtapes of like punk rock. And that's how like, you know, there'd be like college kids there who would drive out to shows or drive out to the city. And they would put mixtapes together of punk bands and ska bands. And that's how I found it. And this one tape was going around that had Benoit Balls by Blink-182 on it. So when I heard they were going to be in Corpus, I asked my mom, and my mom drove me and waited in the parking lot
Wow.
while me and my brother.
Nice. Waited in the parking lot. That's awesome, Mom.
Yeah, yeah, it is very cool. And then I mean, she was a single mother, and like probably just happy that we weren't doing drugs and like getting arrested and shit. So like she would drive me and my skater friends. Like we had a van, and she would just load us all up, drive us to San Antonio. Like the second show I ever saw was MXPX. Like same time, 96, 13 years old. Drove up to my mom drove us to San Antonio, and it was like a tooth and nail tour, and it was MXPX headlining. So yeah, at that point I was into like MXPX.
Did you know? Did you know what you wanted to do with your life at that? Like when you come from a small town, like I don't really know, so I'm just like wondering, like what is everyone's like you're hanging around. Does everyone just expect to just kind of like kick back and stay there your whole life, or did you know that you wanted to get out of Corpus and write or like do whatever involving music?
I mean, this is like kind of a cool thing I'm realizing right now, that I feel like I might not have been that concerned back then. Actually, now that I'm talking about it, I definitely wanted to be a pro skater when I was 13, and just like skateboarding. That was all I was doing with my friends. I was never good.
Yeah, me too.
I was like, that's like the most like ridiculous dream I've had, because I like, it's like I can dream of writing TV shows and movies because I mean, I believe I'm good at it. I'm good at writing, but like I know, and there was never a point where I ever thought I was good at skateboarding, but there was still a point I thought I was going to be a professional skateboarder. So
I was doing the same thing. I would watch like go through like Thrasher magazine, check out the music section, see what bands they mentioned. Get out my deck. All my friends out here would be doing the same thing. My shins are probably still lumped up from like 30 years ago.
Oh yeah, dude. I'm sure I still have like scabs on my knees from 20 years ago. But yeah, no, I remember like telling girlfriends that I was going to be a professional skateboarder.
That's a good
and
angle.
I was never good, man. I was never good enough to say that. It's so weird. I'm just realizing that now. But I think I just always had an idea that I wanted to do something that wasn't corporate, or that wasn't like, I think I knew that early in life that I was not cut out for just like a normal job. We're talking about when I was 13, and then when I was 14, I started my first band.
Okay.
And then once I started playing music, I had the same drive that I have now with this self-published book, like that DIY punk drive that you learn from going to shows and like being part of that community. And I started booking my band. We started playing in Dallas, 8 hours away, Houston, 4 hours away. Like we started getting around, and the longer we played, the better we got. And like I went on my first tour when I was 17 years old, and I booked that tour myself. At that point, I was sure that was going to work out. I was sure I was just going to play music for the rest of my life.
Do you think that that's something that you looked at coming from such a small town, that you felt like maybe like, hey, this is my ticket out of here, or a way to travel, just check different things out?
I think that's exactly what it is. I think that everything I ever thought of when I was a teenager and into my 20s and now was I need a ticket out of here, and like corporate life didn't look like that to me. Which it is. It's just as much of a ticket out of there as anything else. Like I just didn't know that then, and I'm glad, because maybe I would have done that. But
yeah, because I'm trying to piece your trip. Because I've heard you say New York City is the best city ever, and that's always like an interesting thing coming from someone that didn't like necessarily was born here. So I like to hear that. That's cool. Because I feel the same way, but a lot of times I'm like, oh, maybe just because I live here, that's my perspective. I know you went from there, and somewhere along the way you went into the service, didn't you? Right?
Yeah, I joined the Army when I was 25.
What made you want to do that?
Oh, complete like hopelessness and just loss of direction or any idea of who I was. Like I did it because I had gotten out of a long relationship. I had just lived in LA for a couple of years. I lived in Nashville for a little while, and then I ended up back in my hometown. And I just saw myself as like a failure. Like I moved to LA to write, and I was working at a small indie label in Nashville for a little while. And those are all things I really wanted to do with my life. And then I just ended up back home because like I wasn't a very smart adult as far as like being responsible. And so I ended up back in Corpus where I never wanted to be back. And I had no direction. I had no, like, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And so I felt like joining the Army would kind of force me to get disciplined and, you know, make better decisions. But I joined as a photographer. Like that's a job in the Army. You could be a combat photographer, a combat videographer. And that's what I joined as.
Okay. That's interesting.
Because I also wanted to, like, I felt like going to war would give me stories to write when I came back and give me this experience that like was what I needed to be a successful writer afterwards, you know? So there was a little bit of like thought to it, but also I was in a really like desperate time in my life of not really knowing what I was doing.
You're someone who, you know, from what little I know, you know, I try to follow. You're a gambler. Like you definitely are someone that doesn't like to stay. Like I feel like you go for things, and for better or for worse, and you do them. And
well, I used to be, and then I joined the Army, and it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life. And the lesson I took when I joined to get all these valuable lessons from it, and the lesson I took from it was stop doing things spontaneously. like think this shit out before you actually do it, because you just jumped into the fucking Army and everybody who knows you told you that's a bad idea, and you did it anyway, and it fucked you up in the head. And it was just not, it's definitely like the worst experience I've had. And so that's like, I came out of there with a very like solid idea of don't ever do anything spontaneously again. Put a little thought into it at least. So that's worked out.
I didn't know that happened after L.A. and Nashville, because you said you went to L.A. for writing. So you went to L.A. first, right?
Yeah, when I was 22 to 24, I was in L.A.
So, you know, I love the journey. So take me on the journey. Take me to L.A., how you got there, why you got there. Fill me in.
So I'll go back to my playing in bands. I played in bands till I was like 21 or 22, and then I went back to college for 2 years. And when I was in college, I was a history and political science major. I became the president of College Democrats. Okay. And this is during the Bush versus Kerry election, which was my first election. I actually turned 18 days after Bush's first election. But anyway, I got super invested in the Bush-Kerry election and put all of my fucking energy into it. I booked like touring bands to play at my college. I made a political film festival and all this shit. And then John Kerry lost, and I felt fucking crushed. And so I dropped out of college and moved to LA, because I was just like, turns out I don't want to be politically involved in this world. I want to go write worlds into the way that I want the world to be.
Okay.
And so that's what led me to LA. And so I was there for 2 years, you know, just kind of writing my own stuff. Nothing ever really got produced, but it was it was a great time for me to like meet different people, learn things. I worked on a lot of movie sets in different ways, and so it made me. It showed me that.
No, go ahead, keep going.
Sorry. So it showed me that so I did a lot of like background extra work, but a lot of also some PA work, and so like it showed me that world was not too far to reach. You know, if you're from anywhere other than LA and New York, you probably feel that like movies and TV are so like they're these magical things that like how could you possibly be involved in it? So moving to LA kind of showed me that it's really not that difficult to get into it. And that's kind of what gave me a little more motivation to keep believing in it.
Did you want to? So, were you into like screenplays or like like stuff like that? Is that what you wanted to do, or just?
Yeah. So before I moved to LA, I wrote a short film, and then when I lived in LA, I wrote me and a guy I met out there was like my best friend out there, my writing partner. We wrote a sitcom, and that we like wrote the pilot of, and then we wrote like 6 episodes of it. And this is in the time of like Always Sunny in Philadelphia just launching. And so like every young writer just thought like, oh, well, these guys just made something on their own and now they have a show on FX. We can do that too, you know? So we were writing TV shows and we wrote this sitcom that's, I mean, still pretty good in my opinion. And I'd love to make it eventually.
Yeah. I mean, is that something, could you give me like just a quick synopsis?
It was about us, kind of about like we were trying to, he really wanted to be an actor and he's a good comedian. I moved out there thinking I wanted to be an actor, but quickly realizing I didn't. And I just wanted to write. But so it was about these 2 guys who are just trying to be actors so they can get laid. So every episode is just them coming up with new schemes to get laid, which would like probably have us canceled in numerous different ways now. That canceled means something different today. There's definitely a lot in those scripts that we wrote 15 years ago.
I think that's a funny premise.
That would have to be different, that would not make it on TV today. Yeah, no, it's really funny. Like we were both pretty smart about things, and we both like clever and funny, clever and smart comedy. So I mean, I think it's still good. And then I wrote myself. I wrote a pilot for a 1-hour drama that's about this musician who's like, and we're talking like 15 years ago. So he's like the singer and guitarist of one of the biggest bands ever. And like at the beginning of the episode, his mom dies back in Texas, and he has to go home, and he has this like 16-year-old little sister that he's living this like sex, drugs, and rock and roll life, but now he's got to like raise his little sister. It's there's a lot more to it than that. And it's, I mean, I feel good about that, but
yeah, that's anything to do, like if I wrote, obviously that would be the same thing. Super relatable stuff because we're both into music, we're both musicians. I just watched a movie called The Incoherence. Have you seen that?
No.
So it just came out last year or maybe this year. I got to look, and it's like self-produced. Like all these guys are just kind of like, you know, they got together and made this movie. So it's about a guy who has like an office space type life, and decides that he wants to get his indie rock band from Brooklyn back into playing. So he reaches out to all his 45-year-old ex-band members.
Nice.
So basically the singer broke up the band in 95 when they were just about to get big. They opened up for Sebadoh at Knitting Factory. And it shows them all now in their mid-40s, and it's such a cool concept, and I couldn't recommend it more. The Incoherence.
Yeah. Where did you watch it?
I just rented it on YouTube. My cousin, who actually, coincidentally, he just moved to, I don't even remember where in Texas, but he moved out to Texas, and he texted me. He's like, "Oh, you got to check out this movie called The Incoherence."
Yeah,
so
cool. I will check it out. Yeah, no, man. Like so like the same thing kind of happened to me. Like I was the singer of both of my bands, and I did all the like management stuff, the booking stuff. When those bands broke up, it was someone else's decision. And that was so like, that was the big, I mentioned it in my book about like my first band. It was a Christian ska band actually. And we played for 5 years. We toured 3 times. And we would play like, as we played, later in the years, like I got better at writing lyrics. We weren't like super Jesus-y. We would play like secular, like regular clubs with regular bands. We weren't just
interesting.
a church band.
You were big into religion?
Yeah. I mean, like as cliche as it is, it was more of like a spiritual thing than a religion thing.
Yeah, man.
Because like I found it on my own. Like I wasn't raised in a religious household or a spiritual or Christian household. I just like kind of came to it because my friends went to church. They invited me to church. I went myself and I found something that was what I needed at that time, you know?
Yeah.
And I still believe in it, you know, 100%. Whereas like I don't necessarily like follow all the rules or anything, but, and I like don't subscribe to, I mean, I don't, when I say that, I don't mean I believe in the Bible literally 100%, but I still believe in what I came to believe back then, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
it's something that's yeah, like you got your own thing with it, and
yeah,
to me, I'm like, whatever makes your day better is usually what I'm a fan of,
no, I know, man. Like that's the same thing. Like I have friends who, one friend in particular who, um, is super atheist in like, she's, you know, one of those smart atheists who can like discuss things and, you know, argue her points and stuff. And she's like a recovering addict. Um, and there are still points where she'll like post on Facebook. I mean, it's been a while, but there were points where she would post on Facebook about like the, the misery in her life with like her kids that she couldn't like have custody of, and all these like issues, and like she was definitely struggling in life. And I told her, like, we were close enough friends for me to tell her this, that like, why not go to church? You know, if nothing's working for you and if you feel lost and you've never tried that thing, even if it's fake, even if it's not real at all, like the feeling you get from drugs is a temporary thing that's not permanent. So why not try a fake religion and maybe you find that same fix in it? Like who cares if it's real or not? Like you obviously need something and you refuse to try that?
Yeah,
Like why?
happiness
You
is
know?
sometimes I do, like, when you go through social media, and it's the same people, you have your news feed, and sometimes I read some statuses and I'm thinking like, "Hey, how are you never happy?" Like
Yeah.
there's nothing that makes you happy, and I don't have it all figured out, but I just, somewhere along the way, like once I hit 30, I realized nothing is really a big deal, aside
Yeah.
aside from like maybe cancer and unemployment. Aside from
Yeah.
aside from those two things, like nothing matters. Just like wake up and
Yeah.
have the only time I get mad is if I get mad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like where I'm like, shit. I'm
Yeah.
like, why did this get me so mad?
I know. There was, I mean, up until about 8 months ago, before all this shit going on right now, man. Like I would always, it was always pretty clear that I don't take anything seriously. But as I'm sure you've seen, I have been very serious on Facebook lately about like fucking cops and
Yeah, yeah, I see it.
like COVID and all that shit, like with the political side of it, which I hate doing. And I always end up the next day going back and like hiding things just because like one, the conversations that happen in comments just ruin my day and they kill my productivity. So like I just kill them because nobody's convincing anybody of anything. So I just shut it down. And then also, like, I'm still trying to promote my book, and I don't want people to look me up on Facebook and think I'm this like hardcore political person, and then not have me like on a podcast or something.
No, for sure, and
So,
it's especially the book is so far from that. It's such a
oh, totally,
it's such,
yeah,
such an
yeah.
internal and music journey. But so I want to go to Nashville because I think I remember you saying that you went to Nashville and started a comedy club with your brother.
And that was in Corpus Christi.
Okay, yeah.
Um, yeah.
You have a very almost like Forrest
No,
Gump
I
life,
know.
man.
Well, yeah. I mean, I like that comparison. I
Yeah,
wish it was as prestigious as
yeah.
that. But um, yeah. So like, I was in Nashville for a bit, and then like I moved back to Corpus, and um, then I did the army, and then when I got back from the army, my brother and I started a comedy club because he and I started this magazine in college in 2002 called The Vent, which was just a zine at the time. It was like literally printed out on a Xerox machine, folded over with our hands and stapled and handed out to people around our college. And it was called The Vent because our college newspaper was owned and run by the college, so people couldn't really vent in it. And so we would let people bitch about the college and ours, but then we would also write satirical news like The Onion or The Hard Times, but
oh wow, interesting.
for our college.
What year was that?
Well, I mean, this is 2002. Like The Onion was around in a print form, but Hard Times wasn't around. So we were doing that there, and I would also write like music reviews and stuff because this is my tiny hometown that's never heard of bands like Hot Rod Circuit or Saves the Day, and we could go to Austin and interview those bands and then bring them back to our little town. So that's how I got started writing. And now that magazine, like my brother's been running it in the way that it is now, it's like the Village Voice of Corpus Christi now.
Oh, so he's
like,
still doing it?
Yeah. It's all he's done for the last like 15 years.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And so it's like the magazine people pick up in Corpus to find out what's going on, but it's not a weekly because there's not enough going on in Corpus for there to be a weekly.
That's cool. But he's still doing like the paper, and he gets to.
Yeah.
It's such a, certain people need creative outlets. I'm one of those people. Like I'll do the podcast, I'll do the music, like anything as far as to just So with you was like was writing the constant in your life? Was that always the constant?
Yeah, like I have started saying that like I think I'm a storyteller. Writing, so like my first experiences with it really, I mean, I used to write when I was in elementary school. Like I think I've always had that. I remember writing stories when I was in elementary school and like really wanting to be a writer. And also like I remember very early in like kindergarten or first grade, I don't know what made me think this, but I wanted to be a comedian. Like I don't know who I was watching in first grade to like tell my teacher I wanted to be a comedian, but I just think that's always been in my head that like I wanted to affect the way people felt by telling stories.
So then tell me, I forgot because I cut you off about the comedy club.
Oh yeah. So, so like, I mean, to go back to your question real quick, like I started playing in bands when I was 14, but that was because I like wanted to write what I was feeling, and I didn't know how else to do it. I was so into music that the way I wanted to do it was by writing songs. And so I did that for 7 years. And then when I didn't have bands anymore, I started writing in the zine with my brother. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just always been a part of my life of like wanting to get out what's inside of me and wanting it to affect how people feel. It's so, the comedy club, when I got back home from the army in 2009, it was actually when I came home from Nashville in 2007, I started doing stand-up because I had always like been funny. I was always a class clown. And then like me and my brother were writing that zine and writing funny shit in there. When I lived out in LA, I wrote that sitcom with my buddy. I would write sketches for his sketch comedy troupe. I just never had the balls to perform because I was too intimidated in LA. I was too intimidated in Nashville. But then when I got to Corpus Christi, I was like, no, I can do this in Corpus Christi. Like I'm not intimidated by any comedians here. And there were some good ones there, but it was just enough in my head to be like, oh, I have enough confidence to do it here. And the first time I did it, man, I did an open mic night and I didn't get the light to get off the stage for like, I want to say like 14 minutes. And you're supposed to do like 3 to 5 minutes. And I was just like, I had my material and I went up there and they didn't cut me off to like 14 minutes. And that was like super cool for me because like, for me, it's the same thing as writing this book. It's like, I'm not going to put something out there unless I'm confident in it. And so like, I never really like told jokes on stage unless I knew they were ready. At least to be presented in a way that like, they're almost there, And so, yeah, I did pretty good at stand up when I did it. I did it for like 4 years.
Wow. You did it for a while. I didn't know that. That's crazy. Yes.
Yeah.
What a life. I mean, what an interesting life, for sure. Like everything that you were not afraid to try. I mean, everything from a zine to the service to comedian to a ska band to religion. And
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't give me the credit that I wasn't afraid to do it. I was just kind of like not thinking,
Hey,
I like
that works too.
Like even the stand-up thing, man, I was never comfortable doing it. But in Corpus Christi, where you're like not writing TV shows and not like there aren't a lot of opportunities there to be creative, that was my one way to keep writing and keep staying fresh and to like keep my comedy chops up. I had to get out on stage and do it, Yeah, man, I did it for a while and it was fun, but most of the time I was almost always drunk or high while I was doing it. Never comfortable doing it.
I'm a sober guy. 1998.
For how long?
22
years.
Yeah? Yeah, man.
Wow. Congrats.
Yeah. I mean, it's whatever now, But
did you do that because you had to, or you just decided to, and that was it?
Yeah. No. It wasn't decide. I didn't decide. It was decided for me.
Yeah.
But it took a while. It took a while to get there, for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like my dad's been sober like as long as I've been alive, and I've never known him drunk. But I think he just got in a lot of trouble in the Navy when he was in the Navy, and they kind of forced him to do it. But which whatever, that's fine. I mean,
yeah.
He's a healthy guy. But then I also like went out on tour with a couple back in 2015 for my charity Zero Platoon. I went out on tour with Rocky Vodolato and Dave Haas.
Oh, cool.
And Chris Farron. And I was the only one who drank on that tour because Rocky was sober because he had issues with drinking. And then Dave Haas had decided on that tour to start being sober. And he was going to like write while he was out on the road. And he's been sober for 5 years as of like last month or something. So like, that's why I asked, because there's some people who just decide I'm going to do this. And then there's some people who like have to do it.
I got it out of my system quick from like 13 to 20. Yeah. Like, I'm an ex-junkie. You mentioned the Chelsea Hotel.
Chelsea,
yeah. So let's get to the city, man. So what brings you, like what brought you all the way to New York? And, then we could talk about this book.
Yeah. So I always knew that I had to live in LA or New York. At least I always knew, like through my 20s, my late teens, like, I mean, I played in bands through my teens. So like, there was nothing in my head saying I had to leave Texas because I had my bands. We were doing well from there. So nothing was telling me I had to leave Texas then. But then in my 20s, when like I didn't have my bands, I knew I needed to get away because I knew I wasn't going to find what I needed specifically for me to feel fulfilled. And so when I got out of the Army and went back to finish college for like media studies and like TV and film stuff, I applied for an internship at Comedy Central and I got that internship, which I actually got an internship at Warner Music in LA first to work in music licensing, which is like another dream job of mine because I love like the idea of putting music in TV shows and film.
Absolutely.
That's like a dream job of mine. And I got that internship first, but then I was offered an internship on the Daily Show and Colbert Report digital team at Comedy Central in New York. So I like had to choose between LA and New York, music and comedy. And I just, I had done.
That's some deep shit, right? That's like your life basically then, basically.
Dude, it was. And I had like already accepted the Warner Music internship. So, but like, I knew how hard it was to get into TV comedy, and maybe it's hard to get into the music industry, but I didn't know that. Like, it just seemed like another record label job. There's a ton of those, but like Saturday Night Live, like even now in my late 30s, I know it's impossible to get.
Yeah.
you know? And so like writing gigs on the Daily Show or the Colbert Report at the time, like that shit is hard to get. Only like 10 people get those things at a time. Whereas like record label jobs, there's hundreds of at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like it just made more sense for me to go for the Colbert Report and Daily Show thing. And so I had to like call Warner Music and tell them I changed my mind. And so I came up in 2011 to New York to do this internship at Comedy Central. And that's when I started writing the book, because there was this girl here that I had known for a long time and, you know, thought things were finally going to work out with us. But that's what brought me here. And then after that, I was here for 5 months doing that internship. And then I moved back to Texas because I had one last semester of college. And before I graduated, like a few weeks before I graduated, Comedy Central hired me for a job in their digital department. And so as soon as I graduated college, I had a job and I moved up to New York for that. If I hadn't had a job, I probably would have moved to LA and just taken my chances out there because I had already lived there. I really like it out there.
Is the Matrix easier to break in New York or LA?
I think it's easier in LA because
that's what I heard.
I lived there for 2 years, and the way that I explain it to people is that like, because it also goes to like the whole like idea that people in New York are assholes, which I don't believe there are more assholes here than anywhere else. I think there's just the same amount. It's like I say in my book that like I think New York has the same like asshole per capita average. There's just more people here, so there's more assholes.
Absolutely.
But I think it's even everywhere. And in LA, though, the entertainment industry is so big out there that if you're like at a bar, it's a pretty safe bet that person over there is interested in entertainment like you are. Whereas in New York, there's so many different industries that like you could be sitting, like you're on the subway and you don't know who does what, you know? So like there's no like safe bet with people here. Whereas in LA, it's a pretty safe bet that people are interested in entertainment, you know?
Gotcha.
And so it was easy for me to make friends out there. I still have some very tight friends from out there that, you know, I can see I hadn't seen in like 10 years, and then we'll meet up and we're just the same as ever. So like, yeah, it was really easy for me out there. And it's a nice little community. I feel like it's easy to like make good friends out there. So if I didn't have a job here in New York, I probably would have just gone to LA and figured it out. But I had a job here and I came here and I hated it here for a good 3 or 4 years and almost went back to Texas. And then a big part of it is that I met my wife. And also a big part of it is that I moved to Astoria in Queens, and that just made everything better.
Shout out to Steinway.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, no, it was like I was living in Bushwick before Bushwick kind of like blew up.
Okay.
And it's just like I would have to go to 4 different bodegas to get groceries, and it just like did not feel good living there. But then I moved to Astoria, and there's like grocery stores and good restaurants, and
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, man, I definitely love New York now. And it's only been in the last 2 years that I like am totally fine staying here for the rest of my life. But up until then, I was like, I'm ready to go to LA whenever you are.
So, why this book? Why now?
So yeah, like I was saying, I started it in 2011. Like the book takes place over a weekend in a hotel in the Times Square Renaissance Hotel, which I won. I won this like photography contest that was for concert photography, and I took this picture of a band of, you know, the band Set Your Goals.
Yes.
I took a picture of them at Warped Tour. That's a very cool picture. And it won this contest that Live Nation put on with Nikon cameras. My prize was 2 tickets to any Live Nation concert, a hotel stay, round trip airfare, and car service on the night of the concert. And so like, it was the year that Watch the Throne came out from Kanye and Jay-Z.
Yep.
And they were doing that tour. So it was probably like the next year, actually. They were doing that tour, and I asked for tickets to that, and they were like, anything except watch the Throne. So
why?
I don't know. I guess it was just in such high demand that they couldn't spare 2 tickets. But it's great that happened, because Portishead was playing in New York City, and I love Portishead. I'd never even seen them tour the U.S. before. I don't think they've been to the U.S. since then.
No, they probably around the time they put out Third.
When was that?
So it had to, like, I'm gonna guess like 2011 sounds right to me. Why not?
That's when I went to see them. Yeah, because I was here for my internship.
It had to be, for sure. Which I didn't like that record. But when I tell you Dummy and the self-titled,
of course.
I mean, life changers. Complete.
Oh, totally.
Like those records. Like Dummy is one of those records that you put on in the background, and most people don't know Portishead. But when you put it in a room full of people,
everyone knows.
Everyone's like, but most people are like, oh, what is this? You know, and I'm like, oh, that's Portishead. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, man.
You know.
Yeah, and that was the thing, is I looked up other concerts in New York, and I was like, oh shit, Portishead. Like, I have to go to that, and I'm glad I did, because I haven't seen them come to the U.S. since then. So yeah, that was like but since I was already in New York, I just asked if I could like stay at the hotel anyway, and they gave me everything. Like, I got to use the plane tickets later, but so I had to stay in a hotel. I went there for the weekend. I had the goal to write. I didn't know what I was going to write. I mean, it's just like it says in the book. Like, I packed my Adderall, I packed my Xanax, I packed my Ambien, I packed a bottle of Johnny Walker, and I packed a fucking microwavable dinner, because I had no money, because I was on an unpaid internship. That's it, man. And like, my goal was just to like pop Adderall and not sleep at all and just write. But I didn't know what I was going to write, you know, like, and then this book came out. So like, probably more than half of it was written in that weekend. And so for the people who like haven't read it, it kind of bounces back and forth every other chapter, from like present day in New York, in that hotel, me obsessing over this girl that I like had convinced myself I was in love with at the time. But then it goes to like flashbacks of all these other like New York romance stories where I felt the exact same way. Like, I thought this girl was the one, and then I thought this girl was the one. And you would think that would make me feel like, okay, so maybe this girl isn't the one. This happens all the time. But it didn't, you know, like, I struggle with major depressive disorder and anxiety disorder, which is a big part of the book as well, because that's what fucked my brain up to think that way, you know? And that's what this book's about. It's just like having a fucked up brain that just makes everything more fucked up than it really is, and how dangerous that is, because like, I almost die like 3 times in the book from my own stupid decisions.
How do you feel?
So
how do you feel now that the book is out?
Dude, it's such a relief, and I didn't expect that. Getting it out there, because I mean, like I said, I started it in 2011, and then I put it away for a good year because I was too scared to go back to that mindset. Then I like went back and I finished it, but then I still hid it away because I didn't want people I work with to know that I dealt with that stuff. When I met my wife, I didn't want her to know like how serious it was. And like some of the.
Why do you think that is though? Because it's such a thing that so many people go through, and I don't think anyone would really look down on that, you know? Like, why do you think you were trying to hide that?
It's definitely like something that's more acceptable now to talk about. But 5 years ago, I don't think it really was, you know? But also, like, that's just another thing that the sickness, you know, it's the same way people talk about addiction, you know? It's the sickness telling you that, you know? It could not be real at all. It's just the sickness tricking you. And that's exactly what it was, you know? Like, for a long time, when I was worried about people knowing that I dealt with depression and anxiety the way that I had, it's because I still was dealing with it that way. And now I'm much healthier mentally because I actively work to make myself that way. And so I'm not as afraid of it anymore because I know I'm not that person in the book anymore. But there was a long time where I still was that person in the book, and that's why I didn't want people to know, because then it's not like they were finding out that I used to be that. I was exposing that I still was that, you know. The only reason this book is out is because I finally read it one day a few years ago and didn't see that person in the book as me anymore. And that made me more comfortable to like put it out to help people who might see themselves reflected in the book, because I no longer do.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great feeling to look back. That's why it's easier, you know, like even what I said before, it's like, you know, 22 years. when someone says congrats, I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess. I'm like, it just doesn't even feel like a part of me, you know. So it's
I hear you.
But I really love like I told you, I'm not a reader. I could barely read a Facebook status, but I skimmed through this, and what I really like is just the idea of anything that's so soaked in music and emotion like this. Like you watch like a movie like 500 Days of Summer, you know, it like everything about it is so like in sync with music and the way he feels. And I love a lot of the songs on here, man. Like I love that you started out with Jimmy Eat World, especially 23. You have the Smoking Popes in here, which I feel like never get enough love.
Oh man, they're so underrated.
So good, right?
Yeah, like, and they just put out that new record like last year, the year before, and it's so good. It's just as good as any other Smoking Popes record. Like they didn't feel like they had to mature their sound or anything, and I fucking love that, man.
Yeah, it's such a weird, like I try to explain, it's like if like Frank Sinatra sang for like a punk band. It's just like it's so crooner, and I hate Frank Sinatra, by the way, but it's so crooner stuff, but it's just like the songwriting is so fucking fantastic. And it's
funny, man, because like that's the thing, like that's why I was like really stoked to talk to you, because it's the same thing, like, you know, with my wife, like growing up on Long Island, like you guys like had a little bit more, I mean, a lot more exposure to stuff than I did. But like, it's like everything I learned about music, almost everything came from TV shows. And like, you know, old 97s had that song Question on the show Ed. And like, I loved that song. And so that made me look up the old 97s. I probably wouldn't have known them ever otherwise, you know? I mean, I just learned about so many bands from TV. Like that's kind of like, I'll watch shows. Like I've watched like, I tried to watch that show like Pretty Little Liars because I was out of TV shows to watch. And I know that those teeny fucking bopper TV shows always have great soundtracks. And I learn about so many new bands from them. So I like gave it a chance in hopes that it would just teach me about new music.
That's how Scrubs was. Scrubs was like, oh yeah, we talked about Scrubs, I think, right? Didn't we? Like, I know, maybe I mentioned it on Facebook, and because we were talking, we definitely talked about it on Facebook. But like, Scrubs was another one of those fucking shows that you're like, yo, this song's really good, and like the soundtrack like selection was so good.
Do you remember when was it Colin Hay was like in an episode?
Yeah.
That was so great, man. That's such a great episode.
And I could never figure out who Dan Andriano from Alkaline Trio sounded like. And then one day I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm like, I know this voice.
I put that together for sure. I think it's just because like I might have like seen that Scrubs episode like on like as a rerun, kind of when Dan was like putting out his solo stuff, like when he first started doing it. So I think I like was able to put it together then. But yeah, no, I hear it every time.
For sure. So I'm gonna put links up to the book and all that other stuff, and you know, try to get it out there more. And
cool, man.
I know that we were gonna talk about our favorite New York centric movies as well, right? We both love movies. You live in New York, and you had the idea to discuss, because, you know, we love pop culture here. We love movies, music, TV shows, all that other shit. So, tell me what you wanted to talk about as far as, like, New York.
Yeah.
What was the idea, basically?
Well, so the idea was that, like, so I come from South Texas, small town, and I feel like anybody who grows up, at least in, you know, the Midwest, but I feel like probably anywhere outside of New York, romanticizes this city as, like, you know, every time in the book that I call it the greatest city in the world, it's in quotes because that's what everybody calls it everywhere. And so we all just have this idea of New York, and those of us who are creative or ambitious in the creative world, you know, have it as this like mecca that we have to get to. And so I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that, but also with you being a native New Yorker, and I mean, you're from Long Island, right?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up here. I was born in Queens. Probably
Okay.
moved out here '88. You know, but yeah,
Okay.
roughly Queens, Long Island.
I mean, well, like I'd love to hear like what someone from here thinks about that, but also like how you guys see it, you know, and like what movies you think of, because there's, I mean, and you saw on Facebook, I kind of put it out there and asked people like what their favorite New York movies are, and everybody listed everything, and I made some criteria of like stuff that inspires you to go to New York, but also like stuff that's realistic, but nothing that'll change your mind from wanting to go to New York. And people were like throwing Taxi Driver up there. I'm like, okay, like no, like I get it. Taxi Driver is a New York movie. I get it, and that's like one everyone needs to see. But I kind of wanted to keep it related to the book, whereas like I in the book talk about all the pop culture stuff that made me romanticize New York and made me think I had to come here. And so like Taxi Driver wouldn't necessarily make somebody want to go to New York. But
Yeah,
and there's a lot of movies like that.
I that was your criteria on Facebook, but I mean I did my own thing because
Oh,
I told you
oh yeah,
I was more into soul crushing. And
yeah,
listen,
yeah, yeah.
I don't live in Manhattan or Brooklyn or those places, but every time, like I'm one of those guys that never fell out of love with that area. I love the distance I have from Long Island, a lot of leg room, but you know, we're like 40, 50 minutes away, no big deal. And
Yeah.
like anytime I go, we went to, so for my birthday in February, right before the pandemic, my girlfriend and I, like we, you know, got a hotel room in the Lower East Side, and I'm like, oh fuck it, let's go to Sing Sing. We'll do like a birthday get together
Nice.
here. So that's what we did. Stayed there, did some karaoke, and you know, hung out in the city for like 3 days, somewhere on Ludlow, and it just there's the comparison. I'll tell you the comparison because I just came from upstate, so we also went away just because we're like, all right, what are we gonna do? We can't leave. We can't do anything. So we went upstate to like some secluded shit that she likes to do. And I'm thinking like in my head, I'm like, who likes this? Like I can't even like I get it. And like listen, I'm a good sport. That's what she wants to do, and she likes shit like that, and whatever she wanted to do, I'm like, yeah, let's do it, whatever, no big deal. But as far as I'm concerned, drop me off at St. Mark's all day long.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I'm a chaos guy.
See, even for me, like coming, like because I grew up in such a small town, I can't even imagine living in the suburbs or like living out like because it's come up, you know, moving out to Long Island because you can buy a house out there that's, you know, fairly affordable. But like, I just can't imagine moving out to the suburbs, and maybe like in a few years if we have kids and stuff like that, maybe. But like, I just have to be around. I have to be around the city. But that being said, I fucking hate going down the Lower East Side on a weekend, man. Because it's all like college kids like dressed way too nice to be out on the Lower East Side.
Yeah, I mean, like that part is fine. Like I don't want like, you know, like give me what I'm saying is in comparison. Like I like the access to certain things. Like I like
sure.
You know, I like being able to go to Brooklyn or wherever because I like where we needed to drive like an hour just to get fucking gas, and I'm like, in my head I'm thinking like, where the fuck are we? Like, you know, but yeah,
we're about to go out to Vermont to Burlington, Vermont for our 5th anniversaries in September. So we're doing like 4 days out there, and we're staying in an Airbnb that Cyndi Lauper apparently lived in.
Oh, that sounds fancy AF.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a time when she wasn't fancy, but
yeah.
Yeah, and so like I didn't want that criteria to be for you. I was putting a broad criteria out there just to see what came back at me that I could like in case I wasn't thinking of anything. But honestly, like all the suggestions people made to me, either I had already thought of or like I would never include on my list. like the Warriors, like so many people said the Warriors, and I like that's not like that doesn't fit my criteria of like, something that would inspire somebody to come to New York,
Yeah,
for me, like
not at all.
I was kind of expecting our picks to contrast, like yours versus mine.
Yeah, for sure. And that's good.
But so yeah, how do you want to do this? You want to go one and one?
Let's do one and one. Let's do one and one. So give me your first one.
So this is a pretty easy one, and I think fits pretty well. It's Big with Tom Hanks.
Okay.
I think that one kind of captures that whole like imagination of New York, like what like makes, it's a magical movie, and it gives you that feeling about New York. Of course, he also gets like an adult woman has sex with him at a point in the movie.
Yeah.
and then like in the end sees that he's like a 13-year-old boy.
That is pretty funny when he's walking away, right? And the suit gets bigger.
Oh man. So like 2 Halloweens ago, my wife and I was Josh Baskin. I bought an oversized suit.
Oh, that's great.
And so like I had the arms hanging loose and the pants hanging loose. And then I made I cut up a cardboard box, and she was the like the Zoltar or Zoltan thing. Yeah, that's what we were for Halloween a couple of years ago.
That's so good. That's a good one. Okay, so I picked a movie. I went a little bit left field on this one, but I feel like a lot of people should have seen this movie. It has Ben Kingsley. This one's called The Whackness.
Where Drake and Josh Kid is a weed dealer.
Yes, exactly. Did you actually see it?
I did see it back in the day, like, because it was like it was in the time when like all the indie films were actually getting like spread out everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was I saw that.
So the summer of '94, New York City to me was a big deal, and growing up, predominantly listening to nothing but like indie rock and hip hop, the soundtrack made sense to me. So like all these songs.
Nice.
From like the Raekwon record, or maybe Nas was on the soundtrack. I don't remember who exactly was on the soundtrack, but this movie was just really cool. Josh, his name in the movie is Luke, actually. Luke Shapiro, kind of like a summer in his life, and Ben Kingsley is his psychiatrist, and he sells his psychiatrist weed. And it's just kind of him maneuvering, like leaving, and his fucking weird family, and it's kind of, I guess it's like a coming in of age type movie with a killer soundtrack based in New York City '94, and I couldn't recommend it more. And it's realistic, it's super realistic, and that's why I like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and check that one out again, man.
Yeah, for sure. What's your next?
I'm gonna go with Boiler Room. So when I was 18 and my band moved to Austin and we started like touring out of Austin, I worked at a telemarketing spot like for MCI WorldCom, and it was run exactly like Boiler Room was, like so many perks. Like we made so much money for just like hitting our quotas and shit. I was 18 years old and I was like shopping for a BMW.
Wow.
Like it was ridiculous. Like me and my buddy, like they would give us these debit cards where like if you hit your quota, you got like $20 on your debit card, but if you went over it, you could get up to like $50. And me and my buddy who played trumpet in my ska band, we worked there together, and every day we would just go to like Outback Steakhouse and like eat dinner there because we just made $50 on our debit card. Like, of course, we're fucking kids. We're not saving any money or investing it. We're just like spending it.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do back then.
Yeah, exactly. But like, you could tell that I don't think I'd seen Boiler Room yet then. I'm pretty sure it was probably out already. Or maybe everybody was just like in the movie Boiler Room, they watch Wall Street and they're all like in their real life mimicking Wall Street.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it was.
Greed is good.
When Boiler Room was out, also I love Giovanni Ribisi. He's great. That was a cool movie for me. Not necessarily like inspiring to like come to New York, but it just had that New York energy to it, you know? It just made everything seem more real and like higher stakes. And as I was putting this list together, I thought about it that like my like New York inspiration didn't come when I was a teenager or a kid. It was actually in my 20s, really, or like probably late teens into 20s when I was really trying to think about what I wanted to do with my life. And so that's why this movie like hit right at that like perfect time of like thinking bigger and just wanting that kind of energy of like, I don't know, doing something that
New York, fast paced and ambition. No matter how distorted like that view was. So,
there's a really great line in that movie too, where like all the douchey bro boiler room guys are at a bar and they're being douches, and then there's this table of gay guys, and one of the douchey bro guys goes, somebody just needs to get an island and take all of you and put you on that island. And one of the gay guys goes, guess what, honey, you're on it. Because they're like in Manhattan.
Yeah. That's so good. All right, so I picked one, and sometimes I watch a movie and it's so Hollywood that it's off-putting because it's like, can't explain it. It's like too much movie magic and it's nonsense. This is one of those movies where it actually worked unapologetically. I feel like I'm one of the only people from my friends list to basically like Collateral Beauty. You ever hear or see that?
I don't think I've heard of that one.
Will Smith, Ed Norton, Kate Winslet. So Will Smith is like this big CEO, and him and his wife have a tragedy. And then from there, he kind of like goes into this really humongous deep depression. And he is...
Wow, how have I not heard of a Will Smith movie? That's crazy.
This is this is great. This is like one of those like really fantastic dramas. Helen Mirren's in it. So anyway, he starts coping with his depression, and basically the company and the people around him are trying to run it, and he's like this aloof dude who just can't get over this tragedy that happens, and he starts writing letters to love, time, and death.
You know what? This is starting to sound familiar. Yeah. It's a very it's kind of like an abstract movie, right? Is there like some abstract elements to it?
Absolutely. So he starts receiving he starts receiving answers from these letters that he's mailing, and he can't really explain it.
I remember seeing the trailer for that in like a theater, but never really following up on it.
Listen, this movie, it's one of the it's movie magic, and some of my friends were like, "Oh, it's just too corny," but to me, it really worked. It's like it's like The Shape of Water. Remember that movie?
Yeah, but I didn't watch it. I have it saved on like one of my lists on HBO or whatever, and I keep meaning to watch it, but I haven't seen it yet.
It's one of those times that you go to a movie to watch a movie.
Yeah.
Like where I mentioned the whackness, that's a little bit more realistic, a little bit more relatable. This is movie magic. And the story is so well written. There's some great twists and turns. Collateral Beauty for me and my New York City.
All right, man.
All right.
No, I like this. I'm learning some stuff. I didn't want to. It was too easy to do like the cliches of like You've Got Mail and When Harry Met Sally, which I love.
Yeah. If you would have done it, then that's fine. But like I wasn't going that route.
No, I know, but for me on my end, as far as like related to the book of like believing in the New York romance thing,
absolutely.
Like, those are there. Like I even mentioned When Harry Met Sally in my book, but so I those are my like honorable mentions because they're too cliche. So to give me a little more cred, but also kind of cliche, Kids.
Oh, come on!
Of
course, great.
And that's one that like for me as a skater kid when that came out in South Texas, like seeing what like a skater community looked like in a real city, and kind of seeing that me and my friends were like there to the extent we could be in our little town. And it kind of also taught us how to be like a tighter group of friends, so that's definitely something that put an idea early in my head about what, maybe not New York, but like a real city.
No, but still, like that's a great perspective, basically, for you. Like you said, for the small town, you're watching this projection of like, oh, New York City, I skate, they skate. Super easy to romanticize, for sure.
Yeah.
And you guys were romanticizing the right thing. We were romanticizing, Sid and Nancy.
Oh, dude, we were all just waiting for the opportunity to beat somebody over the head with our skateboards. It didn't come because there were no like real shit in our little town. But no, we all wanted to be those kids.
Yeah, like one day somebody's gonna come and I'm gonna hit them over the head.
Oh man, I can't tell you how many times me and my friends said, "It's like butterscotch, yo."
Oh, of course, of course. How could you not? And it spawned the career of Rosario Dawson, Chloe Sevigny.
Yeah,
Harmony Korine was a real fucking weirdo, but he did some interesting stuff. He did Gummo after. I'm gonna take it to a dark place. I'm gonna take it to Coney Island. I'm going to take it to one of my biggest cinematic crushes, Jennifer Connelly. So this is Requiem for a Dream.
Yep. Somebody mentioned that one too.
Yeah,
to me.
Based out of Brooklyn, Coney Island area, and for someone with drug issues like I had, it was one of those movies that was just so unbelievably dark. The only unrealistic part of the movie was that they couldn't find drugs, so I thought that was weird. But Darren Aronofsky, went from making Pie to making this, and this is not a happy movie. This is a very depressing and dark movie, but man, everyone should watch this at least once if you're a cinephile.
I need to go back to it for sure, because I saw it once in like 2002 at somebody's house, and like I didn't drink until I was 21, and so that would have been 2003. I turned 21.
What a law-abiding citizen you are.
You know what? I was a good Christian boy.
I guess so.
In at least in that way. But no. So like you said, you got it all out of your system. I was making up for lost time in my 20s. Yeah. Where like everybody I went to high school with was partying and stuff. Like I just didn't do any of it. And so like when movies like that happened, that were just like revolved around drugs, it just didn't, it wasn't a thing where I was like, ooh, no, I'm not going to watch a movie about drugs. I couldn't relate to it, so I for some reason didn't gravitate to those movies.
No, that's funny you mentioned that, because when I got sober, one of the movies that came out was Half Baked. And, and in my head, I was just like, I'm like, I don't want to watch a weed movie. Like, I saw Cheech and Chong, and one day I watched Half Baked, and I'm like, this is the funniest movie that has ever been made. Like, I couldn't get over how good it was.
I just saved Half Baked on one of my lists because my wife loves it and says the same thing about it. But that's another one that I was like, I never really cared about weed. I didn't care about drugs, and like it just seems stupid to me. But I'm sure I'll appreciate it now.
It is so fucking funny. It's just so funny. What do you got?
Now to sacrifice any cred and go with just some real pussy movies. Definitely Maybe. Have you seen that?
I don't know.
It's Ryan Reynolds, and the thing is he's like an Elizabeth. What's her name? Banks? Yeah. Elizabeth Banks is in it.
The host of Press Your Luck.
Yeah, exactly. She's in it. Isla Fisher's in it. Rachel Weisz is in it.
Oh, speaking of Darren Aronofsky, that's his ex-wife.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he put her in The Fountain, and I think like a few other things. Yep.
Yeah. So this movie, the little girl from Little Miss Sunshine is Ryan Reynolds' daughter.
Okay, Abigail.
And and he's telling her like, it's basically How I Met Your Mother, but he's divorced from her mother, And so he's telling this story of him coming to New York from like Ohio or whatever. And when he like worked on the Clinton campaign in New York, but it goes through basically his life in New York over decades. And he's telling his daughter about these women that he like fell in love with. And she has to guess which one is her mom. And so it's a total romantic comedy, but also with like a very cynical side of like being that guy who comes to New York from the Midwest and like just wasn't ready for it, but then like gets into it, but then also has to like deal with the dog eat dog part of it, like becoming, what he was always told to be afraid of in New York. And then it has to deal with the different kinds of women that he meets and what roles they play in his development, I guess. It's really good. I love it. Like it's a really good movie.
Yeah, very cool.
But yeah,
I don't remember even hearing about it, but definitely maybe.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with an Abel Ferrara movie. So Abel Ferrara is this, I don't know if you know him, but he's like a New York film director. Like his, the backdrop that he uses so well is New York. This movie's called Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel.
Oh yeah.
What a brutal movie. And it's kind of like Training Day before Training Day. Like this just debaucherous like animal of a cop and his day.
Yeah.
And just the shit that he gets into from smoking crack, shaking down fucking dealers, and making bets, and getting into all wild shit, man. And it's an ugly, filthy New York City movie, and I love it.
I don't think I've seen it, but because it's referenced so much in like pop culture, I'm well aware of it. But yeah, I think I need to see that for sure.
Yo, it's filth. It's just so good. Like, it just and I'll never forget the end. You could never find the song because I think Jimmy Page got rid of it, but Schoolie D, who's a rapper, at the end rapped over Kashmir. And
oh wow,
it was one of the coolest things because Kashmir has this, din-in-it, like just
yeah,
great groove to it. I think Led Zeppelin was like, "Fuck that, you're not using that." And years later, they let P Diddy ruin it on the Godzilla movie. So I don't know what that was all about. Probably because they made way more money on it. So, back to you.
All right. Well, so I'm switching my last one up because it was Serendipity, which I feel like falls into the cliche world there, but it's just relatable to my book. But you can read the book and people can read it and find out why, because I mention it in there. But I'm going to end with A Bronx Tale.
Oh yeah.
That's such a fucking good movie in so many different ways, man. Like and I feel like, I mean, the themes from like De Niro's side, but also like, I feel like there's something there for everybody, if you're a young person, or an adult dealing with like De Niro's struggle with, Chaz Palminteri's character, like, man, it's just so good. And it may not be like, I mean, I think it still is like inspiring. I think it's still a New York romantic movie because everybody in it is so like loyal to the people they care about, but also they're just so like invested in who they are, and they're like, and I think that's at least coming from outside of New York, it's very much a thing we see in New Yorkers, is that like, you guys are New Yorkers, you're proud of who you are and what you do, no matter who you are or what you do. And I think everybody in that movie like represents that. And so it's definitely shows you like, I think that's something that also, romanticizes New York for me, is that it has its such a defined personality, the same way Texas does. I mean, I hate everything about Texas politics, but I'm proud to be from there because of the way a lot of people, are proud are proud of Texas. I got a Texas tattoo on my arm, you know.
Ah, the real deal then.
But no, I think that's exactly what it is. I think is that like the characters in that movie are the embodiment of what we are believe New York is, you know, from outside of New York. Just like a pride and like
very
a loyalty.
Yeah, like a fantastic mob movie, but also it really I think it had a lot to do with De Niro's upbringing. I believe, you know, I know that he's definitely always been married to black women. So growing up, I feel like it was kind of his story, if I remember it correctly, or maybe like he had like some part of it. I know Chaz Palminteri wrote it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And De Niro directed it, I think, right?
Yeah. So he might have just sprinkled a little bit of you know, his angle on it. You love them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
yeah.
like you, when you watch The Sopranos, you're like, oh, you know, I love fucking Tony and Paulie. And then when you really see them do the ugly shit, you're like, man, you're kind of like a dick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing too, man. I just watched The Sopranos like last year.
Oh, I'm on my second viewing.
I had a bad experience with it with a buddy of mine, where we just drank a bunch of orange juice and gin while watching it, and then
I'm glad you mentioned gin, because I thought you were gonna say just a bunch of orange juice. I'm like, wow.
No, and I like threw up for the entire next day, and I think I just associated The Sopranos with that, and then finally my wife got me to watch it because she'd seen it, and we binged the whole thing in like a couple months.
Okay, and so. What did you think of this, you know, watching it now at your age? Because for me, the second viewing, like, I really picked up the nuance. I really picked up, like, how much personality each character was written with. You know, like, just even, like, the mispronunciation of words. Just the stupidity, just the subtle things, man.
Yeah, no, I definitely, like, felt like the characters were all like there was care taken with every character, which doesn't happen in a lot of shows. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't really like see it back then and have anything to compare it to. Yeah. But yeah, no, I definitely felt like I was invested in all of the characters, at least the ones you're supposed to be invested in, you know. And that doesn't happen in a lot of shows.
The one weird thing that I picked up on, which I never noticed the first time around, was strange editing style sometimes, right?
Like it was I don't really remember.
Yeah, it was just like quick cutaways, and like, you know, like they'll be somewhere and then there'll be like a line in another place. Like, yeah, it was just like certain things that stuck out to me where I'm like, oh, I don't remember that edit.
Yeah,
it's such a hard edit.
Might need to give it that second watch.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so my last movie is a movie that I watched like 2 years ago. It's up on Hulu currently, and it's fucking brilliant. It's a movie called Hearts Beat Loud. That's
the music one, right, with Nick Offerman?
Yep, that one. So
it looks good. I haven't seen it, but it looked like something that'll make me cry. Which I love.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Hey, if you want to cry, this might make you cry. I don't know. So him and his daughter, you know, he's a single dad, owns a record store in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And, you know, he's trying to have this connection with his daughter before she goes off to college. And I forgot the girl's name, but she's been in a few movies like Dope and this new movie called Sweetheart. But anyway, so in the beginning of the movie, they write this song together, and he likes it so much, he uploads it to Spotify, and it kind of takes off.
Yeah.
And it's just such a really good movie, and the original songs that they use on it are absolutely fucking phenomenal. Just so good, and like I said, it's Brooklyn-centric. I love Spotify, so they got that represented in there, and you know, it's basically just their relationship before she goes to college, and he's just trying to, you know, just some dude, man. He's just trying to live, trying to have his relationship with his daughter, and he's trying to kick it to some other girl at the same time. And my boy Sam Malone, Ted Danson, is one of the bar owners where he hangs
Nice.
out at. So I can't say enough about it. It's up on Hulu, and if you want to watch it, please do. It's
No, that
so
was
good.
definitely one that I wanted to watch when it first came out. And now you reminded me of it. I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna search it out. But yeah, I think it was one of those ones where it was like it looked too sentimental for me to get my wife on board with it. And so like, dude, I'm always the wuss when it comes to movies. I'm always the one who wants to watch like the wussy movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I might have to. She's out of town this weekend for a bachelorette party starting tomorrow. So just wuss movie marathon for me, man.
Yeah, man, break out the Kleenex. I don't think I really don't think it's that type of movie. I think it's
Yeah.
a very feel good movie. I feel like Collateral Beauty is definitely one of those like that hits
Yeah.
you in the if you're a crier.
Well, she hates Will Smith too. So like, there's no Will Smith movie watching in my house.
This is not a Will Smith. Like it's almost like when someone's like they refer.
Oh no, she just hates him as a person.
Oh, okay.
Like, and like it was before like this latest stuff came out, and I was like, he's a national treasure. He's like an America's sweetheart.
Yeah.
How can you hate him? But yeah, she hates him.
Interesting. Wow. I've never
understand it.
Never had an opinion on Will Smith or that strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Listen, Mike, thanks for chatting with me.
Dude, this is fun, man.
The book, once again, Rock Bottom at the Renaissance. An emo kid's journey, that's you, through I'll do it again. An emo kid's journey through falling in and out of love in and with New York City. And if you like music and good writing, I'm sure you will love this. I'll put the links up. I'll put a picture up.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for hanging with me, man.
Yeah, dude, that was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, cool. So we'll talk.
All right, later.
Later, buddy.